But anyway, for a change, I'm actually going to talk about the EU, which so where we go. And I must tell you that I'm one of the rare breed who actually voted in 1975 to stay in the common market which Ted Heath took us into in 1973. I'm going to start throwing the rotten eggs now. Well, I, along with the rest of the nation, believe that we were entering into a free trade arrangement with our European cousins. Unfortunately, it was never about free trade, and in my case it took me a long time to realise this. The ultimate objective was always political and monetary union, and they are well on the way to achieving that goal. And successive Labour and Conservative governments have continued to lie to us. As a party in government, New Labour has done more than anyone to promote the EU. From 1997 to 2010, they signed 4 new treaties, giving Brussels more and more control over our daily lives. They agreed to give the EU more of our hard-earned money by reducing the rebate that we negotiated, and they presided over the biggest period of mass immigration this country has ever witnessed. Unlike so many of you here today, were so busy working, trying to keep a roof over my head and feed the family, that I paid little attention to the politics of Europe. My road to Damascus moment, so to speak, came in 2009 when an Irish friend of mine was telling me about the referendums they'd been having in Ireland regarding the proposed Lisbon Constitution, treaty, whatever it turned out to be. And I say referendums because, as you all know, the Irish originally voted against it, but then of course the EU didn't like that, so they made them have it again until they said yes. And that sort of aroused my interest, and I thought, well, this doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like democracy to me. And I sort of took a closer look into what had been going on and discovered, as I say, that since 1985, various Labour and Conservative governments have signed up to no less than 5 European treaties without ever consulting the electorate. The EU's own website states, and I quote, "The European Union is based on the rule of EU law. This means that every action taken by the EU is founded on treaties that have been approved voluntarily and democratically by all EU member countries. A treaty is a binding agreement between EU and the member countries. It sets out EU objectives, rules for EU institutions, how decisions are made, and the relationship between the EU and its member countries." Were you ever asked to approve any of those treaties?
No.
No.
Well, I wasn't.
No.
And did you ever read in any party manifesto anyone that gave a pledge to support any of these 5 treaties?
No.
No. Or by stealth. 5 treaties: the Single European Act of 1986, the Maastricht Treaty of 1997, the Amsterdam Treaty of 1999, the Nice Treaty of 2000, and finally the Lisbon Treaty of 2009. Never appeared in anybody's manifesto. We were never allowed to vote on it, but every treaty that was signed, more and more of our sovereignty was passed over to Brussels. And of course, as I said earlier, the Labour Party are responsible for signing up to 4 out of 5 of those treaties. As I said, each treaty has eroded our sovereignty, made us subject to more and more laws dreamt up by Brussels in the form of directives and regulations, which our Westminster Parliament automatically adopts, and of course they make us contribute more and more each year to the EU pot, which peaked this year at a staggering £55 million a day. If you, like me, believe that we should have been consulted, then you must do all you can to get the electorate to vote for UKIP in May at the Council and the EU elections. The Coalition is talking about a referendum only because of pressure from UKIP. We all know Cameron is not going to get an overall majority in 2015. Labour won't even consider a referendum yet, and the Lib Dems want more Europe and the UK in the euro. Take the pressure away from the traditional parties and it will be business as usual. And in 10 years' time, you'll find successive governments will have signed up as up to heaven knows how many more treaties. I'd like to talk about now some of the economic advantages to Great Britain and the North in particular upon leaving the EU, and I'd like to try and address the thorny question of car production as well, because it's extremely relevant in my neck of the woods and it may well be in yours too. Where we live in the North East, we are subjected to massive EU propaganda regarding potential job losses at the Nissan factory if we leave the EU. And naturally, many people are worried, but they don't need to be. And I don't know, do you have the same problem with the Ellesmere factory? Have they started that here with you?
I don't know about that, but...
Yeah.
It won't surprise me.
They have to re-evaluate the situation.
Correct.
As the words
Yeah.
they were using.
Yeah, but we in the North East, as Michael probably convinced, it's even worse than that. Daily, we have huge articles that within a month of us leaving the EU, 180 firms have closed down and this will be relocated to somewhere else in Europe. It's all absolute nonsense, but we'll come on to that. The automotive industry accounts for around 11% of all UK exports, but a majority of those exports go to countries outside the EU. The Eurofanatics are running scared, and they don't care how many lies they tell or how many lives they ruin just to keep their dreams of the United States of Europe on course, and of course to keep their well-paid jobs. How better to pay up to the local fears of people than to imply that somehow their jobs would be at risk if we were to leave the European Union. In fact, the reverse is true. Freed from this straitjacket of excessive EU legislation, it's predicted that our economy would grow at a much faster rate, overtaking France within 5 years and Germany within 15. The EU economy is in freefall. When we joined in 1975, Europe accounted for over 30% of world GDP. That's the gross value of goods, finished goods and services. It's now 18% and continuing to fall rapidly. It's predicted within 3 years it'll be down to 15% or less of world GDP. So it's a declining market. Why would we want to be tied to a sinking ship? When we joined the common market, as it was called, we were exporting more to Europe than we were importing. Every year bar one since we joined Europe, they've exported more to us than we have to them. And it peaked last year, in September last year, when they exported £6 billion more to us in the month of September alone than we did to them. So who has the most to lose? If we leave, it will be the EU that is desperate to have the trade arrangement with us, not the other way around. Germany sells more than 500,000 cars a year more to us than we sell to them. Let's face it, Germany is a piper playing the tune in Europe today. Do you think for 1 minute they will allow the French or anybody else to destroy one of their largest car markets? I don't think so. If you leave the EU, they're obliged under the existing treaties we've signed to negotiate a free trade deal with anybody who leaves. I think we'd have a pretty good hand at the bargaining table. Much better than, say, somewhere like Norway, which is totally dependent on selling its exports to the EU. 99% of Norway's exports go to the EU. But despite their lack of real bargaining power when it comes to negotiating trade deals, Norway is amongst two of the most prosperous countries in Europe, the other one being Switzerland. And therein lies another story. The bully boys have already started on Switzerland, haven't they?
Yeah, it's in the paper.
Yeah, unbelievable. Did you read the story? One idiot said, oh, you know, it could mean that we'll cut off rail and air links to Switzerland. Never heard such nonsense in your life, have you? It's just incredible. And also, if we leave, we automatically retain any free trade agreements that were negotiated by the EU prior to 2009. And of course, we would then be free to negotiate our own trade deals with the rest of the world. free from EU red tape, unattainable green energy targets, and with the ability to trade freely with the world and not having to send huge amounts of money to Brussels each day, British industry could grow and flourish. We would have the money to invest in industry, and that's what industry needs. It needs to have investment, to have productivity. We would become even more competitive, and it is more likely that we would attract more rather than less investment from the global car groups. In 2011, global manufacturers invested £4 billion in the expansion of existing car facilities in the UK, and in the last 18 months, a further £5.5 billion has been invested. The UK is home to 7 volume car manufacturers, 3 volume commercial vehicle manufacturers, 11 bus and coach companies, more than 25 niche and specialist vehicle manufacturers, and around 3,000 component manufacturers, ranging from large companies to small to medium sized businesses actively involved in supplying the UK car chain. And of course we've got 8 Formula 1 teams and a large concentration of motorsport firms in what's been called now Motorsport Valley. But remember, only 5% of British companies export to the EU, but 100% of British companies have to comply with the EU rules and regulations. It's interesting to hear Mr. Cameron the other day talking about how he had reduced red tape on business. He forgot to mention that since his government came to power, more than 3,500 EU regulations have been hung around the necks of British businesses. That's over 13 million words of additional regulations since 2010. We must get real. The burden of regulation on business, especially small to medium-sized enterprises, can only seriously be dealt with once we leave the EU. Who remembers when the euro was being introduced, or trying to be by the Labour and Lib Dems? The euro fanatics were telling us that Nissan would close down if we didn't join the EU. Has it?
No.
No. In fact, they've invested even more money in the plans. Does anybody remember a chap called Nick Shields? Well, Nick Shields was the chief executive of Ford, and he was saying the same thing at the time. He was taking the government line, the European line, that if we don't join the euro, all these factories are going to close down. Needless to say, within a year, he was made Sir Nick Shields. Then what did he do? He closed down the Ford Transit factory in Southampton.
Yeah, they all made a journey, aren't they?
Built a new one in Turkey
Yeah.
with £70 million of EU grants. And Turkey's not even in the EU. You can't trust these captains of industry. They'd sell their granny for a knighthood.
Exactly.
Nissan Sunderland has grown and prospered, as has Vauxhall at Ellesmere Port and Bentley and Crewe. I was talking about the northern car plants here.
Toyota
Why?
up there as well, aren't they? Toyota.
No, they're down at Derby.
Derby, they're still a big car company, aren't they?
Oh yeah, big, yeah, but that's how I just concentrate on things that are in the north and east and west rather than, nationally. Why? It has a highly skilled and reliable workforce that can build quality cars which customers demand today. Our car plants are among the most productive car plants in the world. That is obviously because we've had so much investment recently. As I said earlier, we have the investment in industry. We increase productivity. You increase productivity, and then people want to build their plants here because they get a better return on the money. It's all down to business. There have been fears that the Ellesmere plant would close in 2014 with the introduction of the new Vauxhall Astra model due out in 2015. However, interesting fact, compared to its sister site, Opelwerk in Bochum, Germany, Ellesmere Port in 2012 was producing 47 cars an hour over 2 shifts a day. That was the most productive car plant that General Motors had worldwide, while the Bochum plant in Germany was producing only 30 cars an hour over 3 shifts a day. So, in May 2012, the announcement was made that as a result of its superior productivity, Ellesmere Port had won the contract to produce the new Astra. Nissan Sunderland is one of the most productive car plants in Europe, in fact the most productive car plant in Europe. And that is why Nissan decided in 2013 to invest heavily in the plant, opening up another production line and commencing a 24-hour day working pattern with 3 shifts. Our car plants have stable, reliable and established local supply chains. More and more of our cars are manufactured for sale outside Europe. As I said earlier, Europe's a declining market, the rest of the world is expanding. But most of all, most important of all, they make a profit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all that really matters to big corporate business. Big business is not sentimental. It goes where the money is. And the success we have in this particular car industry, has not been accomplished overnight, and it cannot be replicated overnight. It's taken 20 years in the case of Nissan Sunderland to get where they are today, and even longer in terms of Crewe and Ellesmere Port. Labour and the Lib Dems are desperate to keep their seats in the EU Parliament in May. Remember, they're not interested in the country, only in their cushy jobs and climbing up the greasy political pole. How often outside of election periods do you see your MEP, apart from Paul Nuttall? Who even knows the names of the North West MEPs, apart from Paul Nuttall?
Well, we have Nick Griffin, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
Not for much longer, because it'll probably be Louis.
Can anybody name another one?
No.
Not incredible. Sir Robert Atkins, Conservatives.
Oh, I've met him. He's a smooth bastard. He's
Jacqueline Fisher, Conservative. Saj
Yeah.
Kerin, former Lib Dem, crossed the floor to the Conservatives in 2007. Chris Davis.
Yeah.
Liberal, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Brian Simpson.
Yeah.
And Arlene McCarthy.
Yeah.
But I make the point. What have your MEPs done for you? Are they high profile? No, they're obviously just in Brussels, taking the fat salary checks, milking the system, taking it for every penny it's worth, doing absolutely nothing, doing nothing for our country, because they can't, because they're always outvoted, but anyway they vote with the rest of them anyway, so what's the point? And as I say, if you've never heard of them, they're not doing you a lot of good, are they? When they tell you that money from the EU, for instance, they tell us that the metro extension from Newcastle city centre to the airport was built with EU money, and I believe they're trying to tell you that the new tram extension from Manchester to the airport is being built with EU money. They're lying. It's not EU money, it's our money.
Yeah.
We've given it to Brussels, and they kindly give us a bit back, usually with a lot of strings attached. Jobs at risk lie is the favourite mantra of the Europhiles. Jobs depend on the continuation of trade, not on the continuation of EU membership. And that is the point. Continuation of trade, not of EU membership. And whatever happens, we will still trade. The North East is the only area in the UK which actually exports more than imports. The North West is not far behind. They import slightly more than they export, but they're creeping up. Both areas are world famous for their manufacturing skills. And most of the exports from both these regions go to countries outside the EU. The North has the people with the right work ethic. Outside the EU, Britain, like any other country in the world, will be able to sell its goods and services to the EU member states, while being free to negotiate our own trade deals with the rest of the world. The truth is that our membership of the EU has destroyed British jobs, and it's destroyed them in two ways. Firstly, by imposing excessive and costly regulations on businesses, including the many regulations that make it unprofitable to recruit and employ workers. And secondly, by allowing in EU immigration in vast numbers will have to a certain extent displace British-born workers in the UK labour market and depressed labour rates. Over 90% of the population live in countries which are not members of the EU. As I said before, currently we export more cars to non-EU countries than we do to the EU. It's in the rest of the world that we find the expanding markets, and it's here we need to compete without the excesses of EU regulation. Take away the excesses of EU regulation, continue to invest in skills, computerisation, mechanisation, so that your factories are competitive and everybody will want to do business with this country. What has happened in the past, we all know, is that we've neglected our industries. We've neglected the skills training for our youth. When Tony Blair came to power, he famously said, "Financial services are the future." Didn't care about industry. That's what he said, and that's what he did. Concentrated on financial services, and the biggest decline in the UK manufacturing industry took place under the 13, 14 years of Labour government. That trend has to be reversed. Cameron's talking about altering that trend now. He keeps saying we have to rebalance our economy with more emphasis being placed on manufacturing, which is absolutely right. But to do that, we have to have the money to provide the skills trainings for our youngsters, so that when the jobs are there, we have the trained, skilled people to do them, and we have to have the money to invest in the plants and in manufacturing, so that the plants can be productive and competitive. And we've proved, I'll give you two examples of how we proved we can do that: the Ellesmere port plant and the Nissan plant. Given the right investment, we in this country can build things better, more efficiently and more productively than any country in the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why when we leave the EU, we will continue to get more inward investment, not less, as the EU scaremongers is trying to tell us. We'll get more rather than less, and therefore jobs will not be at risk. It's a hard one to sell, because obviously it is dependent on, as I say, spending money and investment, which is UKIP's policy. And of course, if we're not sending 55 million quid a day to Brussels, there's an awful lot of money you can do something with, isn't it? An awful lot of money you can do something with.
A lot of taxpayers' money to make 55 million.
Sorry?
A lot of taxpayers' money to make 55 million.
Yeah. Just a few additional facts for you to consider. Open Europe estimates that the top 100 EU laws cost our economy £27.4 billion last year. That's more than all the council tax that was raised across the whole country. Last year only 27 billion was raised in council tax. EU policies added 14% to your energy bills, and also to manufacturing's energy bills. The higher the cost of energy to manufacturers, the higher the costs of the end product, and the more chances are the factory will close down, it will go to somewhere like Indonesia or wherever it is, where they don't give a monkey's about global warming or climate change, or whatever you want to call it. And what we're up against, the EU spends around 2 billion a year on self-promotion. That's more than Coca-Cola spend worldwide. So that's what we're up against, a massive publicity, the PR machine of Europe. The EU lost 1.2 billion in foreign aid last year. Can't account for it. Then where's it's gone? And the EU admitted only last week, that corruption is widespread over the whole of Europe, with billions going unaccounted for every year. So I ask you, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to manufacturing, we're best out of the EU. They will throw everything they can at us, lie to us, they'll lie through the teeth to keep us in the club because they need us more than we need them. They export more to us than we export to them. We are one of only 6 countries in the whole of the EU that contributes more money than it takes out. So the man don't want us. We're the muppets giving them all this money that they can lose, squander, slip in the back pocket, brown envelopes here and everywhere. It's crazy. That's just a broad oversight from my point of view on manufacturing and the advantages of us leading the EU. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to leave you this thought, that the EU is not the solution to our problems, the EU is the problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.